Good afternoon. Today's topic is biochemistry and macromolecules. So, what is chemistry? Chemistry is the study of the composition, structure, and properties of matter, and matter is anything that takes up space and has mass. So, how does chemistry relate to biology? Well, biology is the study of life. Living things are made up of chemicals, and there are lots of chemical reactions that are taking place inside of living things. So, it's important to have a basic understanding of chemistry to understand biology. So, biochemistry is the chemistry of life. All right, so there are chemical reactions, like I said, occurring inside of living organisms. There's two types of reactions that we're going to talk about. A physical reaction involves a change in the state of matter, and so no new substance is produced. So, for example, crushing a can, melting an ice cube, those are physical reactions. They do not lead to a new substance. A chemical reaction involves atoms or groups of atoms reorganizing into different substances. So, rusting, that is a chemical reaction. Combustion or burning, and cooking an egg. When you cook an egg, you change the chemical components of that egg. It's no longer the same. All right, and so chemical equations, when you dealing with chemical reactions, you're going to see a chemical equation. And so a chemical equation describe the substances, and the reaction and arrows indicate the process of change. So in a chemical equation, you have reactants and you have products. The reactants are the starting substances, and they're on the left side of the arrow. And then the products are the substances that are formed during the reaction, and they are usually on the right side of the arrow. So whatever's being produced are the products, and the reactants are the starting materials. And you can look at this arrow as an equal sign. And so the reactants will yield the products or produce the products. So an example of a reaction we have here on the screen, and you guys have it on your paper for number 4. It's carbon dioxide, and we have water, and then we have glucose and oxygen. And so, what biochemical process does this chemical equation represent? You guys should know we've talked about this. And on this side, you have your reactants, and on this side of the arrow, you have your products. So make sure you're labeling the parts of this chemical reaction on your paper. And does anyone know or remember what chemical reaction this is? All right, so if you said photosynthesis, you were correct. Good job. Here is a energy diagram. So when you have a reaction, you have energy that's either being taken in or energy that's being released. And so you can see by this energy diagram that the amount of energy for the reactants is higher than the amount of energy for the product. So energy diagram just illustrate the energy being used or produced in a chemical reaction. And so now we're going to talk about activation energy. So activation energy is the minimum amount of energy needed for reactants to form products in a chemical reaction. So make sure you get that definition down. And enzymes are special proteins that help to speed up chemical reactions by acting as biological catalysts and lessening the activation energy. So enzymes, they lower the activation energy, they lower that energy that's needed for the reaction to occur, and it does not increase how much product is made, and enzymes are not used up in the reaction. And so here is an energy diagram, and you can see that the light green is with the enzyme and the dark green is without the enzyme. And you guys can see the activation energy and what the enzyme does to the activation energy. It lowers the activation energy. And that's how enzymes are able to speed up chemical reactions, because they lower the activation energy. And remember, enzymes are proteins. We've been talking about macromolecules in class. And so enzymes are special proteins. So here's more information about how enzymes work. The substance that's acted upon by the enzyme is called the substrate. And you guys can see in this diagram that this is the substrate. And then the specific location where the substrate bind is the active site. So in this diagram, this is the active site right there. And you can see that the substrate is specific for this active site. Like it fits perfectly into this into the active site. Both of these substrates, it's actually two in this diagram. And so an enzyme and a substrate fit together like a lock and key. All right, so make sure that you guys draw and explain the energy diagram that's shown here, and make sure you understand that enzymes, they lower activation energy. All right, so enzymes are biological catalysts that speed up reactions in living organisms. Enzymes are so important for a number of reasons. They are important in photosynthesis, cell respiration, growth, waste removal, DNA replication, movement. These are just some examples of processes that occur that require enzymes. Enzymes are so important. And now we're going to switch gears and talk about macromolecules. I know I was going a little fast, so if you need to go back, like if you need to pause or rewind, then make sure you're doing that so that you can get your notes organizer complete. All right, so now you should have this macromolecule chart in front of you. And we're going to review the macromolecules because we have talked about macromolecules in class. So macromolecules are large molecules that are formed by joining smaller molecules together. So that's what macromolecules are. That's the definition. They are large molecules made up of smaller molecules or monomers. And so macro equal large. Macromolecules are also known as polymers. Poly equal many. And so many what? Many monomers. Monomers are the smaller subunits that make up the polymers or the macromolecules. So the monomers are the building blocks of those macromolecules. All biological macromolecules are organic molecules, and that means that they contain the element carbon. So on your chart, make sure you fill in that middle part. The definition contain what element? We said carbon, and they're also known as polymers. So these are the four macromolecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. We're going to talk about each one in more detail. We're going to start with carbohydrates. So the building blocks of carbohydrates are monosaccharides or simple sugars. These are some examples of monosaccharides. You have glucose over here, and you have fructose over here. And carbohydrates are your body's main source of energy. So that's their function. Simple sugars provide you with fast-acting energy, and complex sugars or starches provide you with long-lasting energy. And some additional functions of carbohydrates are that they are important for structure and support. So if you are if you're preparing for like a big athletic event, you want to make sure that you take in those complex carbohydrates so that you can have that long-lasting energy. All right, so here are some more examples of carbohydrates. We have grains, pastas, fruits, vegetables. Cellulose is the carbohydrate that forms the cell walls of plants. And here's some additional information about carbohydrates. So they are made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And two monosaccharides joined together, they form disaccharides. An example of a disaccharide is sucrose or table sugar, and lactose, the sugar found in milk. And some people are lactose intolerant, so they can't digest that sugar. If many monosaccharides join together, they form polysaccharides. Remember that prefix poly means many, and that would be the Those are complex sugars such as starches and glycogen cellulose. All right, the next macromolecule we're going to talk about are lipids. Lipids are fats, oils, and waxes. They don't have a true monomer, but they are made up of fatty acids, glycerol, and other components. So for the building block, you can put this fatty acid glycerol. The primary function of lipids is to store energy. Some additional functions would be insulation. So we see this walrus right here has a lot of fat or blubber, and that fat provides insulation. It keeps that walrus warm. And also lipids prevent water loss. Lipids don't mix with water. Also, we learned lipids form the cell membrane. We recently learned that the cell membrane is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. And then there's also plants that have a waxy layer or a coating on the leaf, and that's to prevent water loss. And then honeycomb in a beehive is another example of a lipid. So here are some more examples: butter, oils, avocados. These are all examples of lipids. And then hydrophobic or water-faring. And so a lipid is hydrophobic. It does not mix with water. So lipids are solid at room temperature, and some lipids are liquid at room temperature. And lipids with only single bonds are saturated fats. Lipids with at least one double bond is unsaturated. Lipids with many double bonds are polyunsaturated. The next macromolecule we're going to talk about are proteins. Proteins are so important. The building blocks of proteins are amino acids, and these are some examples of amino acids. There's 20 different amino acids. We're going to talk more about the amino acids later on in the semester, but there are other 10 amino acids you can get from the food that you eat. So that's why it's important to eat food with protein, so you can get those amino acids that you need. All right, so here are some of the functions of protein. So they are involved in nearly every function in our body. They provide structural support, build muscle, communicate signals between cells. They speed up chemical reactions. Those enzymes are proteins, and then they also control cell growth. And here are some examples of foods that contain proteins. So meats, eggs, nuts, cheese, milk. Hemoglobin is an example of a protein. Insulin is an example of a protein. And here's some additional information. So the structure of a protein determines its function. That's very important to know. And proteins are made up of the elements carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and sometimes sulfur. It makes up 15% of our total body mass. Wow. And you guys know that our hair, skin, and nails are made up of protein. And amino acids are held together by peptide bonds. And you just need to remember that proteins are made by ribosomes. The last macromolecule we're going to talk about are nucleic acids. And nucleic acids are they are made up of nucleotides. So the monomer of nucleic acids are nucleotides. And the nucleotide has 3 parts: a sugar, a phosphate group, and a base. We're going to learn more about the nucleotides and nucleic acids in our next unit. But DNA and RNA are both examples of nucleic acids. And nucleic acid, this is a picture of DNA. They store and transmit genetic information. That's their function. And here's a picture of DNA versus RNA. So we can see DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded. And here's some additional information about nucleic acids. So they are made up of the elements carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and hydrogen. DNA is double-stranded, it's only found in the nucleus. RNA is single-stranded, and it's found anywhere in the cell. And that is it. So make sure you have completed all parts of the chart, and I hope you guys have a good day.